And good evening and welcome to Frankly Speaking, where truth is our mission, reality our realm, said as we see it, and frankly as well. I'm Joe Spina.
Paul Crowley. Welcome to Frankly Speaking.
And Blazing Saddles.
This is the new theme?
Yeah, Blazing Saddles. Well, what it is, there's a new sheriff in town.
New sheriff in town?
Yeah, will be.
Well, there will be, that's right.
Yeah.
And what's this, there are 13 candidates?
Absolutely. 13 candidates.
For Essex County Sheriff.
Isn't that amazing?
Yep.
And certified by Secretary of State Gavin.
Right. How many Democrats, how many Republicans, how many independents? Any idea?
Yeah, two independents who are automatically in the finals. Automatic.
As long as they got the signatures.
They have them. They do not have to qualify.
Okay.
You know, then it's not like one of them is Mark Archer, who's a retired state trooper. Who I had as a student way back when.
His brother, the guy I grew up with, Stephen Archer.
All right.
He's a big wig in the fire department right now.
Right, exactly. So he's a public safety guy.
Yeah.
Living in Bedford now, I understand.
Who, Steve or Mark?
Mark, and he's also an attorney.
Yes.
So he's running as an independent along with Kevin Leach, who was a former Republican, and he was a former county commissioner from Manchester by the Sea.
So I think everybody will know of the two major Lynn candidates, but can we talk about the others first?
Oh, sure. And but you asked for how many. There are 6 Democratic candidates running for that office, vying for the seat, and 5 Republicans.
Okay.
Now, what's fascinating, I want to get into this with you, because this is an election year that's kind of exciting, and is that the word we should use, exciting? It's certainly got a lot of energy, right? Both negative and positive.
Well, because of the...
I'm not so sure that running as a Democrat, Republican, independent, I think it may have some currency this year. And I'm not so sure.
Independent is like...
I think the independent and the Republicans are going to have a plus, a bonus.
Kind of the old anti-incumbency kind of theme, right?
Not just that, it's that I tend to think, and it's perception that most voters view the Democratic Party as being soft on crime, which is on the rise.
Which maybe that explains why you got a guy like Cousins in there in the first place, right?
Could be. But there is, look, nationally, and we'll get into this in the other segment, nationally, there's a spike. The city of Lynn, which is the largest community in Essex County, right? We have an index factor, or what they call a violent crime factor index of 18. I said, well, what does that all mean?
Yeah, what does that mean?
I'm going to tell you, Paul.
Joe, will you tell the audience, too?
I will tell the audience. I'm going to tell you.
Yeah.
The highest is 100, like on a test. And if you got an 18 on the test, would you be happy with it?
Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's how it works.
So give me an example of a community where violent crime is not prevalent and therefore has a high score.
Well, first let me give you what the correlations are, all right?
Yep.
The city of Lynn has what they call a factor of 7.7 violent crime annual index rate. The national rate is 3.85. And the state, ironically, is a little lower than the national, which is 3.81. So the city of Lynn is about twice as likely to have an incident
of violent crime
than the state at large. But we'll get into all those particulars in our other segment. Let's get back to the sheriff's race. So, you're right. In the city of Lynn, we have 2 candidates who have, there were others who were contemplating, but who are now certified to be candidates are...
Kevin Carpenter, Chief of Police.
Is he currently Chief of Police, by the way?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
And Michael Marks, who is the Superintendent for the Sheriff's Office currently.
So in his particular case, in Michael Marks' case, he would be upgrading his status within the community, in the sheriff's community, right? From superintendent to the actual...
Yeah, right. The superintendent is the highest non-elected position in the sheriff's office.
Exactly. But he's going to be elected now, which will supersede the superintendents. Is that correct?
Yes, he would be responsible for the superintendent at that point.
Can Carpenter keep his position as chief of police and also be sheriff?
Really couldn't answer that. That would seem, it seems like the sheriff's job is a pretty complicated one, and it wouldn't be something that you could just do by
Well, being on the city council and the state legislature would be the same type of thing, and I think Creighton did double duty, and I believe the council president's going to be double
Right.
duty, right?
But you know, as somebody who runs an organization of hundreds of people, like I do at Gliss,
Yeah.
running a police department, hundreds of people, you know, I don't know, they have 194 or whatever, I don't even know what the number is, but let's just call it 200 police underneath Coppinger, right? Plus managing the crime in the city of Lynn. I got to believe that in his role as the chief, he's kept pretty busy, don't you think? So, you know, that's different than being a city
I get
councilor
you.
meeting every couple
So,
of weeks. And
if he were to be elected, you suspect that he'd retire from the police force. Is that what you're saying?
I don't have any expectations at all. I just don't.
Okay.
It just seems to
I
me.
mean, it's worth asking,
The
isn't
other
it?
the other point is that the role of the sheriff, my guess is that you're managing all of Essex County Sheriff Department, including the prison and the farm and all that kind of stuff, would tell me that that's a pretty involved job as well.
It certainly is. And I want to get into the mechanics of what does a sheriff do. You know, I don't know if this is Dodge City, you know what I mean, the OK Corral and that type of stuff. You
Have
know,
a little star and
all that, you know, I don't know if that's what it's all about, but I want to discuss it with you, and the folks out there could possibly write into us and educate us on that, because frankly, I'm ignorant of the whole thing. And
no,
whether
you
they
know,
go
I
on
was trying to
Facebook-
think about what are the issues that a sheriff would be
Well, I want to get into that.
interested in versus the issues that, you know, somebody's running for Congress or the legislature or governor or attorney general. You know, the roles are very different.
Let's discuss that in a second. First, let's give everybody out there the rundown. Okay, 6 Democrats from the city of Lynn, Coppinger, Marks,
Yep.
Chief of Police, Superintendent of the farm, right?
Right.
Okay. From the other Democrats, and let me flip it over here, we have a fellow named William Castro, who's currently a sergeant in the sheriff's office. He's from up north somewhere. I think he's from the Lawrence or Haverhill. I believe he's from Haverhill. Then you have Ed O'Reilly, no relation to Bill, who's a attorney. And
Didn't he run for attorney general or governor or something?
he did.
Yep.
He did. He was a firefighter. He's also at Gloucester. He's a firefighter. I don't know if he doesn't live in Gloucester.
I remember
but-
seeing him at one of the Democratic City Committee summer barbecues a couple of years back.
Well, he's looking to become a sheriff. This is a job.
Before I became independent.
You're now independent?
Yes.
Join the club. Then you have Jerry Rubito, who's from Lawrence, and he's a retired deputy superintendent, I believe, at
He's
Middleton.
retired. I did see
believe.
that he was.
I believe.
read about him.
I could be wrong.
Yep. Okay.
From Lawrence. I usually am, folks. And then there's a fellow named Paul Russell, no relation to Jack, from Andover. He's a former DEA guy, you know, which is interesting.
Right. So the people that are applying for this job all have, you know, pretty significant criminal justice backgrounds.
Fundamentally, yeah.
Yeah.
Kevin Leach doesn't. Kevin Leach was a county commissioner, although I don't know whether he worked in the sheriff's department at one time or another. I know Kevin from way back when. Now, on the Republican side, you have Kenneth Berg from Danvers. I have no idea what his background is. You have Jeffrey Gallo, and he's from Haverhill. He's a lieutenant in the sheriff's department currently. There's an interesting one, because he's been around the horn a long time, and I think he's pretty well known. James Jagora, who is a lieutenant in the Methuen Police Department, but I believe he ran for rep, you know, and did pretty well up in that district there, where I think he was defeated by Tsongas's wife, but he's formidable. And then you have Craig Lane from Newburyport, who I have no idea what he does, and the only woman
Oh, okay, that's good.
running as a Republican. Her name is Ann Manning Martin, and she's
She's Ann Manning from Peabody, right?
she's from Peabody.
Yes, the
And-
Manning family is pretty big over there. You know, they're big in politics.
Yeah, and you know, and a woman, Republican, law enforcement. You know, this may be the year of the woman, right? You never know. So that's pretty much the rundown. Now I want to ask you, because like I said, I have no idea. What does the sheriff do? I mean, can the sheriff supersede Lynn? can a sheriff, or they have to be invited to come into Lynn?
The thing that I know the most about the sheriffs, like I would say there are two things that have always struck me as what the sheriff does, at least for Lynn.
Yeah.
One is they have the farm and the prison, so they take our troublemakers.
The little stick and...
They take the troublemakers and they ship them up there to get them out of our hair.
Yeah.
And then as part of their punishment or their rehabilitation, they give them the stick and they send them back to Lynn and they make them clean everything up.
With a little pick on it.
And if people take advantage of it, I know that the City of Lynn does. I know the Sacred Heart School does. We've had them over in the off-street parking. Has had them over in the parking lot, cleaning up over there. And they do good work. They clean things up, and it's free labor. And typically, what you do if you want to get their service is you buy them a sub at lunchtime.
But I guess the question I'm asking you, we tend to think of the sheriff as the guy keeping law and order, or Wild West, the image, right? The sheriff is in town, going to make sure everything's good and well. But in this case, our sheriff really doesn't have any law enforcement duties per se.
That's right. And and I think like for example, you probably one of the more famous sheriffs is like Arpaio from is it Arizona or?
Yes, but he can arrest.
Right, and he's his involvement is significant along the border and things like that, right?
So, but that sheriff in Arizona has far more law enforcement authority than, for example, the county government up here. That's the point I'm trying to make, right?
No, it is, and the way I would continue that thought is that around here, the notion of county government was kind of neutered many years. It was neutered many years ago. I think it had more authority in years past, and then over time they discovered that it needed to be more. They decided to go local, and I think sheriffs and counties had much more authority years ago, and those powers were stripped away in years past, weren't they?
I think that the sheriff's department is funded by the state. Is that correct? They have to go between the state legislature to get funding for their operations, right?
Yeah. So
they have no taxing power whatsoever. The county itself has no taxing power. The county commissioners can't say we're levying a tax on the residents of the sixth.
And they probably have revenue generating powers, but not taxing powers.
I'm not so sure. Maybe fees for the Ipswich River or something like that.
Or fees for anybody who gets put up in there, and
But by and large, if you can't generate money, and you're at the disposal of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which actually funds county government now. I guess what I'm saying is, why would one want to be sheriff when fundamentally what a sheriff does is he runs a jail for offenders who aren't what you call, Jeffrey Dahmer or the Godfather.
I call them the troublemakers. It's the petulance.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's a low intensity jail, so to speak, prison system, right? And that's fundamentally what they do, don't they? And they try to rehabilitate and straighten kids out and bring them back into society, and they do a nice job of it.
Right, and Frank Cousins has done a great job over the years. I mean, he's got these programs to dealing with the young women and young men who have substance abuse issues and so forth. So, I think that there is a lot of value in what they do, and depending on the energy and the effort and the vision of the sheriff, a lot of good things can be done. And I think under Frank Cousins, a lot of good things were done. And I hope whoever wins the seat recognizes that and does those kinds of things.
I think I'm going to ask a friend of ours to come onto the show who was a operative in the sheriff's department by the name of Thomas Goff. And perhaps he can enlighten us as to what the responsibilities and the duties of the sheriffs are. Because frankly, I'm not quite sure.
Well, and I think that's a great idea. And for those viewers that want to have a better sense of what the qualifications are, so that they can make a more informed decision about who to vote for, right?
Precisely.
Yeah, I mean that would be a great thing. And I think there's been some conversations that we've had with the folks behind the scenes here about actually, inviting all of the candidates to come on.
I would like to do that, and what I want the folks out there to understand, and Paul, you and I have been like this, we're not here to fry anybody.
No.
We're not here to take anybody down, but we're also not here to throw softballs either.
Right.
Okay? Give them an opportunity to tell us who they are, what their biography, their rationale, I don't want to hear boilerplate. I'm sick of boilerplate. You know,
Right.
I don't want them coming in with a microchip in the back of their head,
Right.
and it's right on cue. Ba, 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 ba,
For
ba.
education, public safety,
Yeah.
and good government.
And the other guy's a misogynist, racist, xenophobic, and right? And not of Indian extraction. So, I mean, it is fascinating to me the way the dialogue is going now, particularly at the national level. Let's get into this crime thing, because we already established who the people are who are running for sheriff, and whether in fact they're in the enforcement, whether they had anything to do with crime, I'm not quite sure. I know they're a holding facility for quote unquote criminals. And by the way, you were telling me during the show, which is interesting, what was that little adage you told me about rules and laws and how people view them?
I don't remember that.
You don't?
No.
Well, folks, Mr. Crowley is pretty profound in his thoughts. In effect, what he says, to some people, rules and laws are merely suggestions.
Yes, I don't recall saying that, but okay.
Yeah. Get the point?
I think I said something more about the color of your socks and the bright colors of your shirt.
It's called summertime. We're going to get there shortly. So, the population of Lynn, more updated. Last week it was 90,000. This week it's 92,000. Only because we have a different...
How many are there really?
Yeah, it says about 92,000. We have a crime index of 7.77, and that's per thousand. Per thousand. They use that as a factor. The mass average, Commonwealth of Massachusetts, 3.91. National is 3.8. So as you can see, Lynn is not doing well in the crime department. So it's up a bit. In fact, if you use that density factor that we talked about last week, Lynn has 8,000 people per square mile. Well, violent crime per square mile in the city of Lynn is 259, as opposed to 29 in the state and 32, 33 nationally. So that's a big number, 259.
So I'm not sure I follow that, but I need to ask. So
Yeah.
Lynn is really not like, say, Lincoln or Sudbury or Linfield or
Good
Swampscott.
thinking, Paul.
All right, and these communities are not as dense. The crime is not
Social
as much,
economic issues.
right? They're more affluent,
Right.
and so urban inner cities have much more poverty and all those factors that go along
There are
with
other
that.
factors.
So I guess what I would say is, how does Lynn stack up against other urban settings in the state of Massachusetts?
We're going to get to that as best as possible,
Right.
sooner or later. Because the next thing that I'd like to get across, and our producer, Mr. Diaz, one of the greats, by the way, one of his relatives... went
Pedro,
around-
he's the best.
Yeah, but you know what happened? One of his relatives went around the Cape of Good Horn, in Africa. That's how they found the trade to go to
Yep.
China and India. And, a lot of Portuguese out there. Now, I don't know if he's a Portuguese Diaz, but we're going to make him a Portuguese Diaz for the purposes of giving him some exploratory...
Speaking of people that have made this show great,
Who?
can I just interrupt for a second?
Yes.
I'd like to send a message to our viewers. Everybody remembers Paul Emmons, guy who called in the show regularly. You remember Paul, right?
Yeah.
Used to call all the time. Every
Loved
week
him.
he had great things to say. He was very thoughtful.
Tom was another one, yeah.
But Paul Emmons, I spoke with him yesterday. He's been in the hospital, and I want to send him
Oh, God.
I want to send best wishes to Paul and his wife Mary for a speedy recovery. Get on home. I know we can't call in now, but eventually we want to make sure you're back calling in on the show. And
He was a gem.
yeah, he was.
Matter of fact. Now listen to this one. And this struck me. Law enforcement, this is as of 2/14, and the source for this is Sperling Best Places. By the way, the source for the other stuff is what they call neighborhood scout.com, and it gives a rundown if you want to move into a city. It's an analysis.
Yep.
Well, this was done by Sperling's Best Places, and it's what they call a law enforcement index. So, what it says in effect is the United States nationally, their index is 2.85. That's law enforcement. Call it whatever that means, by the way. Massachusetts 2.81, which is a little better than the national
But
average.
it's basically the same.
Yeah. But Lynn is 2.09. So that means they don't have the same punch that the state and the national forces have vis-a-vis manning police departments, right? So here we are
So we're
with
under-
a
are you
crime
saying-
problem with an undermanned police department.
Ah.
Got my point?
Yep.
So it's an inverse.
And it may even be appropriate to say that the reason that we have the higher index,
Yeah.
the 7.7.
No,
is
we have
because
a crime index, right?
because we are understaffed.
We're understaffed. At least you know that if we were staffed properly, right, then we could probably bring that number down a bit with other factors.
Right.
Now, surprisingly, you were talking about how do we stack up. Well, the 10 most violent cities in America, this is going to surprise you because it surprised me for sure. You know what the number one most violent city in the United States is?
I would have to guess Chicago.
That's what I would have said.
Yep.
And I would have bet everything in my pocket, which is about 27 cents, by the way, on Chicago. You know, because I think you're safer probably in Afghanistan or Iraq than you are in
Yeah,
Chicago.
at least you can have a gun there legally, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So they're shooting up everybody, and the stats are going way up. The number one most violent city, now maybe Chicago has the highest murder rate, I don't know, but overall violent city, Detroit. And they win that honor consistently. This is after the Enlightenment. You know, in other words, once upon a time, they were run by Republicans.
So for the past 50 years, Detroit has been run by Democrats,
Yeah.
and they have the highest incidence of violent crime.
Yeah, and they went bankrupt.
And let me ask you a question: is Baltimore in that list in the top 10?
Of course it is.
Yeah.
Genius that you are.
Run by what? Democrats?
Yeah. I'll give you number two.
And what is it that Democrats do that makes this stuff happen? Can you help me with that? Is it?
They nominate someone named Hillary Clinton.
No.
That's what they do.
No, but
People who rip off the public with phony stuff that they're going to give them,
Right.
as they're picking up $250K to Yiki Yak for 15 minutes to Goldman Sachs.
Right.
They're whacking Trump on this.
So
Trump
they
University,
pretend
and
to
wanna
be
hear
for
the
the
best one?
people. Because they have the best argument for we're for the people, but they're really full of crap. Is that
For
what you're
themselves.
saying? Yeah.
Power.
Right.
Now, you want to hear the best one? Who do you think made $16 million over the last 4 years with a for-profit university, involvement of a for-profit university? Maybe Bill and Hillary Clinton?
Is that right?
Yeah. For-profit university that didn't do too well, a lot of complaints. They made $16 million in their pocket over the last 4 years affiliated with that university. And all we hear about is Trump University, isn't it? I mean, this is unbelievable. But that's another day. Detroit, number one. St. Louis, number two. Oakland, California, number three. Memphis, Tennessee, number four. Birmingham, Alabama, number five. Atlanta, Georgia, surprised me, 6. Baltimore, 7. Stockton, California, 8. Cleveland, 9. That's where we're going to have the convention.
Right.
Not too bright. The Republicans. And Buffalo is 10.
Wow.
They're not even in the top 10. Chicago. I couldn't believe it. But that's the way it is. Now,
Well, it's probably it's what constitutes violent crime.
well, rape, mayhem, and
No,
murder.
I understand that, but
Well, you
as
mean
you
you're
were
talking
saying
about
earlier,
it may be a definitional problem?
well, as you were saying, Chicago is known for its murder rate,
That's true.
which is a violent
but
crime.
they may not have burglaries, and they may not have these other things. Maybe they're not rapists. You know what I mean? Like some of these towns are a little more.
Yeah.
But the spike has been going. Nobody can argue that the spike in urban America is skyrocketing. And by the way, unevenly. For example, places like Miami are not witnessing the same type of spikes that you're seeing in some of these other communities. In LA, ironically, you would think that they would have problems.
You know what I'm glad I haven't heard yet is Boston.
There's a reason why Boston, we're going to get into that right now after I give some more information to our viewing public, who love you, by the way, Paul. I ran into a woman today who told me how much she liked you and watched you on YouTube. I said, what about me? She goes, now you're stiff. So, the 3 most peaceful states, I like the word peaceful. You can go there, breathe the fresh air and the whole bit. Ready? Maine, number 1. Would you believe that one? Maine, number 1. That's got the lowest rate of police enforcement in the country. New Jersey has twice the rate, and they have the lowest crime. Vermont, 2, and New Hampshire, number 3. 3 of the 6 New England states top the list as the most peaceful.
And it has a lot to do with the rural nature of the community. And I'm going to tell you something. My wife is from Maine. I've spent a lot of time in central Maine in Augusta. And Saturday nights at 9 o'clock, there's nobody out on the roads. Everybody's home, you know.
With their guns.
With their guns.
You know, wait a minute. Well, all 3 states are big, heavy, you know, Second Amendment states. They're gun-toting states, all 3 of them.
Right.
Am I right or wrong?
Right, but they also are peaceful states too.
But why? Now, what common factor did I see woven into all of this?
Well, I'm sure you're going to say that, you know, it's because everybody has guns, so that's one thing, right? But the other thing, and I think this is probably at least as important, is they don't have the kind of urban settings that...
You keep doing that. You keep talking about urbanization as being the bane. Not necessarily true. The reason that those 3 states have such a low or are peaceful is because they have a very high, extremely high graduation rates from high school and an extremely low, in fact, New Hampshire has the lowest in the nation, teen birth rate. So they're getting educated and they're not having kids too young.
Right,
and that's
but can't you attribute that to some extent to, you know, the lack of the urban setting? Urban settings, again, you know, this gets back to the point that I was making earlier, or that you helped me make, and that is that urban settings are generally run by Democrats who claim to be all about the people when they're really all about the power, right? And if that's what's going on, the urban settings are not getting the kind of attention that they need, and as a result, what do you end up with? You end up with, you know, poorly educated, you know,
kids out of wedlock,
more drugs,
okay.
You know, all that.
Now, New Hampshire, ironically, has a serious heroin problem, which doesn't show up. Okay, so you could argue, is drug addiction a marker of violent crime? You know, because it doesn't show here. Now, let me go about the 3 absolute worst states, unpeaceful, right? You know,
okay.
In other words, bring armor.
The most troubled states?
Yeah. Dodge bullet states.
Yeah. Okay.
Louisiana. Duck Dynasty country,
yeah.
Number 1. Number 2?
Mississippi?
Close.
Tennessee?
Tennessee, very good. And lastly is Harry Reid State, Nevada. Those 3 are, you know, you gotta beware. Oops. So now, here's the thing about Tennessee that I noted. Did you know that Tennessee has the highest teenage birth rate in the country? Once again,
there's a
correlation there. How strong it is, are there other factors, demographics, you know, poverty, social, whatever, but those are the markers. So, in those states, and probably what you're saying is correct, in those suburban and rural communities you're going to have, but Tennessee's pretty rural, and so is it Nevada, and so is it Louisiana, and yet...
Well, you know, I mean, the determining the root cause in any of these things is really a difficulty. I mean, there are so many variables that go into play.
True, but when that variable shows up consistently as a marker, shouldn't you take it? Because I've heard some wise people say, if you do these 3 things, if you do, any kid out there does this, gets an education, and that doesn't mean...
And you have to do them in order, too.
Get a job at any age, whatever the job may be.
Get educated, get a job, and then get married and have a family.
Don't have any kids until you get married.
Right.
You do those 3 things, you're going to have a successful life. And obviously, you're not going to commit crimes.
Right.
Okay? So that's the way that works. And I was kind of fascinated by that whole discussion and paradigm. I don't know what the answer to crime is. I know this much. If I were living in some of these areas, these urban areas you're talking about, I'd have a couple of 6 shooters myself.
Right.
You know?
Well, you know, and I guess getting back to the question of what causes all these high instances in the urban settings versus the rural settings is, you know, everything kind of starts in the urban setting, and then everybody escapes to the rural, right? So,
Not
Do
you
you
and I. We stayed.
no, I get that, but what happened in the 70s, right? I mean,
A lot of people vanished, yeah. But I think most of that had to do, when my father came to this country,
but they for whatever reason that they left, and we can debate that, but they had the means to leave. It's not. I mean, that's part of it.
well,
too.
because they saved their money and worked hard. I mean, the way you develop the means to leave, the way you get from the North End to Method and Malden, that's the
Or from
upscale.
Chelsea to Somerville.
Yeah,
I mean, to
Saugus.
Saugus.
No, actually, Chelsea's interesting because Chelsea jumped from Chelsea to Swampscott and Marblehead.
Chelsea to Saugus is more prominent.
Really?
Yes.
But the Jewish population of Chelsea found its way to. after
Chelsea
working-
and East Boston have a lot of people that moved to Saugus.
Well, East Boston's now used to be Italian. Now it's Spanish, pretty much Hispanic, isn't it? So it's but people don't understand. The North End was Irish
Right.
until the Italians pushed them out. To,
Is that right? I never knew that.
Yeah, they went from the North End to Charleston.
So it
Charleston,
it wasn't
Charlestown.
called Polcaris, it was Old Polcaris?
Yeah, O'Reilly's.
O'Reilly.
Or whatever. Yeah. It's the continuum.
Right.
Migration. You want whatever you want to call it.
So is it fair to say then that it really isn't the Democrats' fault per se that that what happens in the urban setting? It's just where people have to go to begin to get that start.
The people
and
in
then they
urban
grow and then they move out.
No, the people. Well, here's what happens: the people in urban centers are disadvantaged economically, socially, culturally, right?
Yeah.
And educationally. The Democrats promise them the world. Come show up. We'll give you this. We'll give you that. We'll give you this on someone else's dime. It's like the Romans having the Colosseum, and the games, and the baths, and the free bread.
Bread and
Caesar
circus.
Caesar could stay in control. You
Right.
get what I mean? So what ultimately happened to the Roman Empire?
Collapsed.
Under its own weight.
Right.
All right, because you could not go ad infinitum feeding people, giving them the Roman baths and the games, and holidays out. Romans loved holidays. I mean, one day on, one day off. That's the way it came. Now, how the Romans were successful, people don't realize this. They couldn't do anything. They couldn't farm. They couldn't manufacture. They were kind of illiterate in all of these commercial enterprises. They were fundamentally pirates.
Conquerors, yeah.
Conquerors are euphemism for being a pirate,
Right.
for being a Hell's Angel or whatever you want to call it. They went into town and they took everything.
Right.
They grabbed their wealth by stealing it from everybody else.
Right.
And that's how they fed it. Now, sooner or later, that runs out.
Right.
And if a nation goes down that course, I remember as a young kid reading The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. Who wrote that? Wells? I think it was
so.
Wells, but I'm not sure. And that formulation, it's so vividly happening in the world today, in current history, we should learn lessons from it. Crime is a marker of a society in trouble because we had a wonderful period of time, and folks understand this, there was an actual serious decline in violent crime when Rudy Giuliani was the mayor of New York and policies were in place. And you have to give some credit to Clinton, Bill, who passed that very tough laws during the 90s.
But everybody's running around screaming that all that did was incarcerate more people, and we have the highest incarceration rate in the country.
Oh yeah,
in
that's
the
Bernie
world.
Sanders and Hillary. Hillary, who first supported it, is now opposed to it.
Well, put that aside for a moment
Yeah.
because she talks out of both sides of her mouth all the time, and
Yeah.
she's not even worth listening to, frankly, in my view.
Okay.
But in terms of this question about the incarceration rate, how do you argue against the notion that we do in fact have the highest incarceration rates in the world? We have like 700 per 10,000 or something.
Think about it,
per-
Paul. We don't have-
versus like somebody else with only 100.
It's really quite simple if people just sat and thought about it, but they don't. They get on TV and why anybody listens to movie stars is beyond me because they're shallow. They have no idea what they're doing.
Okay.
They shouldn't be talking about subjects they know nothing about. But doesn't it stand to reason that if you live in an open society, as we do, that's founded on liberty and freedom, that because of that, they're going to take people who are going to take advantage of that. And consequently, we have laws when they take advantage of it, and we take them out of the mainstream, right? In a repressive society,
It doesn't happen because
because if you steal something, you're goodbye hand. Right.
Right.
And anything, they're so harsh and they're so severe and so quick with the punishment and brutal, like ISIS. Speaking of which,
So can I? Let me,
Yeah, go ahead.
So are you saying that the way to shrink the incarceration rate is to be harsher about our punishment?
be tough. Yeah, of course.
Tougher, not necessarily harsher, but tougher.
Of course.
I mean, we still have to
I
be
mean-
humane, right?
Well, if you were down and out, Paul, and I have empathized with people who had a difficult life, but if you're down and out and you're homeless and living on the street, you haven't got a job, no future, what's wrong with going to prison where you got 3 meals there, a nice bed, you watch TV? I mean, it's not that bad being in prison in the United States of America today. It's not like you're in a dungeon.
Well, in some respects, isn't prison becoming kind of a debtor's prison? I mean, if you think about what goes on, is you get arrested, you have to pay fines,
Yeah.
and if you don't pay the fines, they lock you up. I mean, it's kind of a vicious circle.
Well, it depends
there,
on where they put you. I remember guys used to love going to Danbury, Connecticut when they got grabbed for bookmaking or whatever. It was like a country club down there, right? Good food, fresh air, lost weight, got in
Right.
shape.
What they call it, club fed.
It was like, seriously, I mean, so because people came into prison reform for noble reasons, I'm not knocking it. I mean, listen, some guy, my father always said you can get more money with a pen, you can rob better with a pen than you can with a gun. And a lot of these guys that, the Bernie Madoffs of this world and stuff like that, I mean, they're not violent criminals. I'm not worried about them going out and mayhem. Yeah, they steal money, that type of thing. I'm not excusing it, but we got to put things in perspective. What we want to have incarcerated are those crazy lunatics that kill people. There are evil people, Paul.
Yep.
Bad news, there are evil people. What do you do with them?
Yep.
You put them in cages. There's nothing else you can do with them because they're evil. And that keeps the rest of society operating smoothly. And I'm saying because we have a permissive society and we have the ACLU, and if you went to Harvard Law School right now, the professors there, or for that matter, any of the great law schools, supposed great law schools of our country, how many conservatives are you going to find as professors?
None, if any, at all.
Okay. So they're all liberals. They all think la la la, and they're loosening up all of the rules, and they wonder why they have problems.
Right.
So I'm not an advocate, that we should get the, what's that thing they used to put the kid, the stockade, you stuck your head in hand in it. I'm not an advocate of that. That's corporal punishment. That's, AKA torture. That's not my mindset. But certainly to deprive someone, listen, let me put it this way. Can a murderer murder if he's in jail?
No, he can't.
So why do you put him out? Now, you want to hear the best one? As we speak, President Obama is releasing all types of illegal aliens, criminals, who are going out there committing crimes like crazy.
Right.
As we speak.
Why does he
Then
do
you
that?
want to know why there's a spike in crime?
So why is that happening? Why would? What
those
would
are
be,
the
what,
liberal philosophy.
he's the president of the United States. Why would he be wanting to do that? Is it part of his agenda? I mean, I don't know.
It's a combination of his philosophy, what he believes, and any of these folks from the left, folks. I hate to be like this. I really do. Paul, you're an independent. I don't know where I am anymore. To be honest with you, it's an upside down Alice in Wonderland world. But here's what I do know. How's Venezuela doing right now? That was a socialist left-wing country.
500% inflation rate right now.
Worse than that, they can't even feed themselves, right? How's Cuba doing? Cuba, blessed land, not doing too well. How'd the Soviet Union do? I mean, I could go on and on. How would the great states of Sweden, Norway, that I love to talk about, and Denmark, they're not doing that well anymore, right? Since they've been invaded. It's a different story when you have a small population of folks who all know one another. There's a lot of ethnic peer pressure. Now, when all of a sudden someone goes to Sweden, he says, I'm Swedish, and you look at him and you say, seems to me you look like a Martian, right? So what is citizenship versus nationalism. This is the problem in this country. Donald Trump is talking about nationalism, right? And they don't like it. The globalists cannot stand the idea of nationalism.
That's probably, there's two things that make Donald Trump a huge problem for the...
A pariah, yeah.
It's because he doesn't answer to them, and he's anti-globalist.
He's not a globalist, right?
Right.
But most of Europe is starting to say, we don't want to be part of
Right. And I have to ask people at home, I mean, ask yourself this question. Do you prefer a society that is global in nature, where the United States doesn't have any sovereignty, and it's basically run by a world order, which takes further and further control away from our everyday lives? Or would you prefer to have a more nationalistic point of view, where there's more power and control pushed down to the states and the locals, right? Is that fair to say? And we have our own borders, and basically the government of the United States and the state you live in is where the rules are promulgated and developed, right?
Paul, do you own a house?
Yes,
You have borders, don't you?
I do.
Otherwise, you wouldn't own that property, would you? Anybody could go into it. Why would a nation be any different? Okay, now, they don't like Donald Trump for saying, if you're without borders, you're not a nation. Well, it happens to be right. But there are people who don't believe in borders. One of them sits in the President of the United States doesn't believe in borders.
Right. He does not want borders because that would...
No, he wants a flexible
global
world.
He basically needs the United States. So the United States is up here, and the rest of the world is down here in terms of the economic viability and wealth and so forth. And the only way that the people down here can catch up to the people up here, us, the United States, is while they're growing, we're shrinking. So his philosophy is to essentially create a shrinking mechanism for the United States.
Well, not only that, the wealth that was accrued by the United States was illegitimate in his mindset. And
okay, I'm glad you said that, because it's not illegitimate.
I know that, but
it's
their
probably
mindset
the
is-
only place, the only empire in the world that was actually created, where the wealth was created legitimately, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, we didn't conquer anybody to get the wealth.
Well, Paul, don't go too far. No, there are no buffalo around anymore, and there's been a lot of Native Americans who've been displaced. And
well, that happened.
In fact,
but I'm saying,
go ahead.
but I'm saying, once the United States was formed, not when the white man came and did what it
but
did.
we weren't totally innocent, Well, look,
That was 400 years ago. I refuse to take any
Paul.
responsibility for that.
do you remember this ad that used to be on TV from the Navy, and it used to say a global force for good?
Yeah,
The Navy. That was so accurate. That was so true.
protecting the trade routes.
We protected the world. We protected trade for everybody, right? Which everybody benefited from. And it's that simple. The United States has had its warts, but by and large, it has done the right thing across the board.
Right.
Democracy is a wonderful thing.
But I have to say, though, that the invasion of Iraq is the antithesis of what they were doing, because that was not about, to me, they did that for two reasons. One, because they could, and two, because they wanted to destabilize the region.
Were you opposed to the action in Iraq?
Yes.
Both instances, the father and the son?
Not the first one.
I was opposed to both. I'm opposed to intervention in places we don't belong. Ultimately, what happens is you blow a lot of money and you get people killed. Now,
But the first one was a very short duration, and it pushed Saddam Hussein back into his own place. And
yeah, but it was part one and to be continued. You get my point? It precipitated the second action.
So if we let them just do it, and then Kuwait was gone, so what?
You know what we were doing in that region? We were backing Saddam Hussein against Iran, and as soon as he was getting an advantage, Saddam Hussein, we would then back Iran against Iraq. So we played two ends against the middle, and we had.
But that was to keep the balance of power.
Yeah, but isn't that kind of selfish?
Well,
Okay? When we had this guy, otherwise known as Gaddafi, in Libya, who was actually working with us to ward off the ISISes of the world.
that's why I say that, you know, everything was the Arab Spring and what happened in Libya was all, let's destabilize the region, let's create.
But who was Secretary of State at that time?
Hillary Clinton.
Well, how can she walk away from that? Now she wants to be president of the United States.
Well, she'll tell you, and the globalists will tell you that it was a good thing because now
I
what do we have?
understand
We have a mass.
Billy Crystal over there, he's running all over. He's like a warmonger, you know, the conservative guy with the Weekly Standard. I mean, these neoconservatives, understand this, neo means new. These neoconservatives, they love war.
Right.
Now, I happen to think Rand Paul has got the right idea. That's called stay within your borders. I mean, while we take care of the United States, this is what Trump's talking about. Okay, now by the way, folks, I'm taking a look at Gary Johnson from New Mexico and Bill Weld. I'm going to take a look at them. They're legitimate. I want to see what they have to say. They basically say, stay out of my pockets. I want government out of my pockets and out of my bedroom, which I think is a pretty good mix. But that's to be referred. But I don't know how anybody in good conscience, and this troubles me, we have so many people who I tend to like and respect who just go down that party line. I mean, it's okay for the Republican Party to take all kinds of shots, which they're doing left and right on Trump, discrediting and everything he says.
Because the
never happens in the Democratic Party.
The
never happens.
Republican establishment and the Democrats collectively are on the same team.
I think you're right.
Yeah, and they always have been. And here's what's going on. That's why it's getting harder and harder to understand, to differentiate between the policies of a Republican administration and a Democratic administration. It's Democrat-light Republicanism. You know, I mean, it's become that. And all they do is they have this fight amongst each other, back and forth, they want to take turns being in power, and when they're not in power, they will kick the crap out of the other one so they can get in power. But as long as it's either them in power or either the Republicans in power or the Democrats in power, they're always happy. That's how they want it to be. And now Donald Trump comes along and he is not either, and he presents a huge threat to them.
Before Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and the rest of them, there was a settlement made in the city of Lynn, which you acknowledged was established, or at best it was probably incorporated, in 1629. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So, do you know what Lynn, when it was incorporated, what it was called?
Kingsland.
No. Nice try. You're right. On the second trip. Originally it was called Saugus. And Saugus was the, I never knew this, Nipmuc name, I guess that was an Indian tribe, for the area. And I never knew this. Did you know that Lynn included, in that 1629 that you brought to our attention for the 400th anniversary,
Yep.
got that on my mind, Lynn included Reading, Lynnfield, Saugus, Swampscott, and Nahant were all part of Lynn. And at varying points in time, went their own separate way. And actually, Nahant and Swampscott left incorporated Lynn after 1850 when we was incorporated as a city, which is fascinating. Now, 1629 established. By 1635, which by my fast math is about 6 years,
Right.
we're already a tanning and shoe city, which you were talking about urbanization is taking place rapidly in Lynn, early on in colonial history. You know why we have a boot on our seal? I never knew we had a boot on our seal, to be honest with you.
Because we were the shoe manufacturer of the world.
Yeah. From, guess what? Colonial times. You know why? Because the city of Lynn produced the boots for the soldiers that fought in the Continental Army in the Revolutionary War.
Right.
Isn't that wild?
It is, and for you folks at home, I have to, I have to ask this question. How many of you know that the Lynn Common is actually shaped like a shoe? Did you know that?
No. When did you come up with this one,
The
Paulie?
Lynn Common is shaped like a shoe.
Really?
The end closest to the library is the heel, and the end, if you notice, you know how there's a turnaround? You know how you can go down the Commons past the library and turn around and come back without having to go all the way down? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not in the middle. because the heel of your shoe is only, maybe a quarter or a third of the way down the shoe. So you come down and you can turn around and come back, and this whole piece from that point all the way up to the Market Square is the sole. So if you look at it on a map, looking at it topographically, it looks like a shoe. And the only thing I don't know is if it's a left shoe or a right shoe.
Speaking of which, that's the next show we're going to do. We've got a few minutes left. The most discriminated group in the history of mankind in all civilizations are left-handed people, Paul, of which you are one. Did you know that?
I was discriminated against while I was sitting at my kitchen table growing up because everybody was going this way and I was going that way.
Did you know?
And they always wanted to know why I was the clumsy one. It was because I was reaching across, I was banging into people.
Well, it's about 10% of the population is left-handed, roughly?
I don't know.
I think it is. But here's what if 10% of the population is left-handed, when I go to school and I see desks, every one of those desks is for a right-handed kid. I'm talking about the ones that have the scoop in it.
Yep.
You have to get it. So all left-handed kids have to go like this, don't they? So why, if we're so concerned about being fair to everybody, why aren't there at least 10 desks or X amount of desks per room representing the percentage of lefties that are left-handed? Have you ever seen left-handed desks?
That's because left-handers don't consider, they don't grieve it. We don't.
Left-handed people don't agree with it?
Yeah, we don't rise up, right? I mean,
No.
I mean, we don't. If I started a community group of all left-handers in Lynn, and we were going to march on City Hall and make sure that they make the textbook so that we can read them from right to left instead of from left to right, and, or have the binder in the notepad on the right side so that and write from right to left so that
To be continued, Paul. To be continued, folks. This left-handed thing, you want to talk about discrimination? Forget everything. Left-handed people, the most discriminated. In my language, sinistra means left, otherwise known as sinister. And on that,
sinister.
episode 3 is bye-bye. Have a great evening.